seminars, I always learn something when I'm at these workshops from people that come here and really start engaging with us, and it's pretty amazing. So we have no more workbooks, right? If anyone has an extra on the table, that would be great.
Thank you. And if it makes sense to sort of share with someone at your table, I'm sorry, I know there's a little bit of a shortage. We really appreciate your flexibility. Thank you.
So let's move forward. And Eleanor, can you talk to us a little bit about the Maine Permanent Commission on Status of Women?
I would love to. So Maine's Permanent Commission on the Status of Women is an entity that is created in state statute. The commissioners themselves are appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President. And we exist to advise Maine state government about issues related to women and girls, opportunities for women and girls, and barriers that women are facing to better life outcomes, things like that. We are situated in the Department of Secretary of State. Some of you who were here yesterday might have heard from Secretary Shenna Bellows, and we're really lucky to have her support. So this is a sort of very individual career journey focused session today, and Ellen is such an expert in terms of like facilitating that type of self-reflection and thinking about what your goals are. I'm really going to be here to start like putting the context around some of what we're talking about, and I'm going to be referencing some images and some data from our report from 2024 that really focused on Maine women's labor and economic security. This is not going to be a comprehensive presentation on that report, but I just want to call out a few things as we're going along, because I think it's important to, as you're thinking about yourself and the impact you can have, think about how individual stories make up that collective impact and help us get where we're going. So we know that across the age range in Maine, women participate in the formal labor force at a lower rate than men. And we know that women are more likely to work part-time as well. There's a lot of reasons for that. In the last session that was in this room, we talked a lot about sort of different barriers to different types of work. Maybe if you're coming from an immigrant background or if you're a first-gen college student, there was a lot of great discussion around those things. Could you go to the next slide? But we also know that some of them have to do with the sort of ongoing disproportionate care work that women might take on in the home, and that continues to be something that we think about. Maybe some of you have personal experiences with that. We know that women are more likely than men to cite childcare problems or other kind of family obligations as maybe a reason for working part-time. And we know that the high cost and lack of access to things like affordable childcare or maybe care for an older relative or a relative with a disability can also affect the decisions that families are making about work. And I share all this to help you understand why my office exists, and we're trying to address these things at a policy level and at a systems level. But as you're thinking in this session today about your own career journey, and as we're here at this conference, we're thinking about what can make our workplaces work for more people so that eventually we're not seeing these same numbers, right? What are the systems changes and what are the personal changes that are gonna shift the culture around work in Maine? So I'm really excited to turn it back to Ellen, who's gonna get back into some of the workbook work with you.
Thank you so much. So, when I work with a lot of organizations and individuals, we talk about this idea of the power to pivot. And I was actually listening to a woman leader right here in Maine, and she talked about, and she's the owner of Coffee by Designs. She's is a female-owned business, so impactful. And she talked about when she pivoted and decided to actually acquire the entire ownership of that company and the impact she wants to make through a cup of coffee. And it was just amazing. If you ever have a chance to hear her speak, please do. But this idea of the intentional decision to shift your own mindset, right? Shift your own focus and take action in alignment with what truly matters to you. And really sit with that for a minute as you think about what is it that really matters to you. Because when you get that clarity, it gives you also the empowerment to make a shift if that's what is needed in order for you to grow, to start expanding your experiences and elevate yourself to a new level, especially in your career, right? And when you pivot, you actually start enabling yourself to have a bigger impact. And sometimes people say, like, oh my gosh, it's a little scary. And that's absolutely right. You know, when I think about pivoting, and an example of pivoting, I think about people in Maine, and I grew up in Maine, just so you know. In April, when all the spring clothing is out there, and you're so excited to go get your new spring outfit, and you go and you get dressed, and then you look outside at noontime and it's snowing, right? And you could keep going along the straight line and saying, I'm just gonna suck it up and be freezing cold here in April, right? Because it's snowing outside. Or if you're like me, you go drag out the winter boots, you drag out the hat and mittens and the parka, and you just get it all back on and know, you know what, I've got to pivot my thought, my mindset. And that's why I'm encourage you to think about pivoting as an empowering way to embrace change in your own life. And that's really critical. So that's why we're asking you to think about, what is it that you really want? And you can, right now in your workbook, there is a table that gives you some examples of things that maybe you really want in your career, especially if you're looking to get to that next level, whether it's at the C-suite or it's at the VP level or if it's at the director level, wherever you are headed to make a greater impact in your community. Let's start with you and saying, what do you really want? Because that clarity is going to help you then make a pivot if that's what's needed. And so I'm going to give you a few moments to go through that list and think about, what is it that you really want? And when someone is ready, when someone is feeling courageous and brave, I would like you to share what you really want. Do I have anyone here? Anyone willing to share what they really want? Oh, yay, right here, we got somebody.
Just like the top two or three, or? So for me, the ones that I put 5 in that I think are really probably more like a 6 um, is opportunities to innovate or lead new initiatives, and job security and organizational stability, mostly the latter.
Awesome. Those are great growth opportunities. Anybody else want to share what they have? Okay, right over here.
So I have 5 for higher income, working in alignment with personal values, making a positive social impact, improving work-life balance, and job security and organizational stability.
That's fantastic. And thank you both so much for sharing, because this is really critical to understanding where we're going to go next with career planning. Because in order to really have your career, and I'm sorry, my back is to you, and when you really think about your own career planning, you have to understand, what is it, very first of all, that I really, really want? And get clarity on that for yourself. So then when you're out looking for that next opportunity, it is in alignment with what and who you are. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, I'm going to hand this back over to Eleanor, and you're going to talk a little bit about pay and gender wage gap.
So, what's your name in the back? Yeah, Erica. You talked about income as one of the pieces of this, which makes a lot of sense. And from our work, and one of the things we think about, particularly when we're thinking about employment issues and how they connect to economic security, we think about not just the impact on your life now, but on the trajectory of your whole life, right? If you're making lower wages now, you're paying less into Social Security, you might be saving less for retirement. And so that has a big impact on like the economic security of older women in Maine, of families across the length of the lifespan, right? So we think about this as something that really, really matters. And we have a gender wage gap that persists in Maine. I don't think that will shock anybody. In our reporting, we tried to tease it out a little bit by other demographic categories because very few people are bringing just one self to any situation, right? We know that this is an intersectional issue. So we tried to tease it out by things like race and ethnicity, disability, LGBTQ identities, and parenthood, because there's a big wage gap between mothers and fathers. And as we think about this issue, it's not like a new topic. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I think there can be a conception that this is something that is really related to pay discrimination, which of course is still an issue. That's still out there. It's probably underreported, like the idea of sort of different pay for equal work, right? But we also know, and could you go to the next, oh, I could be holding the clicker and I'm not. But we also know that one of the big drivers in Maine is the industry that you're part of. And we see that close to 40% of women in Maine work in the education and healthcare fields. And those are really important jobs. Societally, they are really important. We need folks to help us think about the future, to educate children, to educate young kids and take care of them, to take care of our older populations. Like, these are critical roles. They're also very undervalued roles in terms of pay, and so the concentration of women in those roles is one of the things that drives that wage gap today. So when you're thinking about a pivot, maybe that looks like thinking about exploring an industry you've never even thought of before, but it also might look like really reflecting on how you can advocate for your own value in a workplace or in an industry that is really undervalued historically. That might look like advocacy at the state level. That's the sort of where I'm trying to tackle it. But it also might look like negotiation or switching jobs to pursue a higher wage. That can look really different for your specific career. And I just want to take this moment to acknowledge that I am not an expert in negotiation, and I'm not going to pretend to be, but it's very nerve-wracking to talk about. It's hard to do. I think if you work in a sector that's in the social services particularly, it can make, I speak only for myself, it makes me feel guilty sometimes. Any money that is gonna go to my salary might take away from the programs that we produce. I think there's some anxiety around that, and it's hard to talk about. But I just wanna get on my soapbox and share with you my own emotions about it, because it is hard. But also you all bring such incredible value into the spaces that you enter from your life experiences, your cultural experiences, your education, all those things. And you deserve to be paid a living wage, a thriving wage, and you deserve to be able to retire and be economically secure throughout your life. Did I see a hand? Yes. Oh, information and mining. Yeah, these are categories that are interesting, right? They're lumped together. They're from the current population survey. One of the things about our most recent report is it relies on publicly available data, and sometimes the categories of information are decided for us because of that. So that is one thing to keep in mind, and something we're hoping to dive further into in future reports, because I hadn't thought about mining very much, I have to say. We are doing some great work around women in the construction industry, though, if you want to talk about that after. Back to Ellen.
Yeah, so I am just going to really, really encourage you to have some thoughts about your worth, because it is so important to have these conversations when you're talking about compensation. And there's so many interesting people here at this conference, and we were talking about benefits at an earlier session. And depending on what's important to you can influence what does compensation look like, right? And for some people, it may be about having more time off. It may be about having more flexible hours. It may be more about having a higher wage. But when you go to talk about all of that, Bring it all to the table because you never get what you don't ask for, right? So if you are somebody who's sitting there with their head down, working really, really, really hard, you're doing really, really great things, and then comes that conversation and it gets uncomfortable. Empower yourself. Take that pivot and say, you know what, I have value and I can ask. And you know what, the answer may be no, and that's okay. That gives you a piece of information. But you know what, you may be surprised. Maybe the answer isn't 100% yes, but it's 75% yes, or it's 50% yes. And there's some negotiation that goes on. So I encourage you to think about what do you want and how do you empower yourself to ask for what it is that you want, right? Because many people are willing to have the conversation, at least, right? At the minimum, they're willing to have the conversation. But think about all the different avenues that equate to helping you feel more fulfilled, helping you feel more valued, and having people recognize your worth in your job, especially as you progress. Okay, I'm on my soapbox now. I got to tell you, this just happened this week. Okay, again, one more thing. My daughter called me. I have 5 kids total. They're all older than 30. And my daughter calls me. She's a hygienist down in Florida. And she told me that they just hired someone. Now, she has 10 years of experience being a hygienist. They just hired somebody who is new, just out of school. And she found out they're making $5 an hour more than she is. Right, Mom, what do you... Mom, what do you think I should do? I said, well, honey, what I think you should do is I think you should go and talk to them about your worth. You need to talk to them about all the experience you have. And she recently told me how she had diagnosed a patient, well, not diagnosed, that's the wrong term, but she had identified something in a patient's mouth who ended up having a precancerous condition, right? And she had called in the dentist, and then this woman came back crying and thanking them all so much for finding it and really questioning it, right? So I said, you got to tell them that story. You got to identify your worth, right? And she goes, okay, I think I'll ask for what that person's making. I said, what? I said, that's not your worth, hon. You have 10 years of experience. You need to ask for more than that. And she said, but they won't give that to me. I'm like, well, they won't if you don't ask for it, right? So start up here. And then if they come down here, that you know that's more information for you. That's more like, okay, this is where they're really landing. And be considerate of that. Okay, I'm sorry. I just got derailed on this story. Okay, so when in your workbook there's a worksheet on this idea, page 3, right? Of where do you want to go? Do you want to stay where you are? And so we have 3 columns. Let me just explain this to you. There's a category on the left. There's a column that says stay, which means I want to stay where I am. Maybe you're new to this position and you're thinking you want to stay there, and you can rate passion alignment, and you see there's a scale above. It says 1 very low, 3 moderate, 5 very high, right? So staying where I am, this is how I feel about these different categories. Grow means I like where I'm working. I like it here, but I want more opportunities. I want to take on a special project. Someone spoke earlier about I want more opportunities. I want to try something new, but I want to stay where I am, right? And so then align it with passion alignment, growing where I'm at. What is the scale there? Or growth potential, growing where you're at. And put your scores there. And the last one is pivot. Pivot means I either want to stay where I am, but I'm going to do something totally different, right? Maybe right now I work at a hospital, and I'm actually, a nurse at a hospital, and now I actually want to go to their HR department. I am going to do a total pivot out of that career path. I'm going to something different. Another pivot could be, I want to be in a totally different industry. So you hear about the apprenticeship programs, right? I'm going to leave where I am, and I'm going to go apprentice. I'm going to become an electrician. And so what is your passion for pivoting? Identify for yourself. Where do you land? Are you going to stay? Do you want to grow? Do you want to pivot? Because this all aligns to what? Career planning. This is career planning. Proactively, consciously, intentionally choosing where you're going to go. And this could be 1 to 3 years. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but it makes you think about, where am I going to go next? So I'll give you a moment. Fill that out. Eleanor, do you have any insights on stay, grow, pivot? What are your thoughts?
Okay, good. I think that being really intentional about that is a very cool opportunity. And I think one that I have often felt like I've just sort of been stumbling along, truthfully. Preparing for this session and talking to Ellen has made me think a little more intentionally about my own life, which is very cool. But I think one of the things I've been thinking about over the last couple of hours is, from the last session, we heard from Fatuma Hussein, who was talking a lot about some programming that she's doing in Lewiston, Auburn. And she talked about 2 things that I wanted to sort of shout out. One was, I think her organization or the program she was talking about is developing something they're calling the Thrive Formula. And I don't think it's live yet, but it allows you to put in things that you need to succeed. Like what kind of, are you supporting your family? How much money does that take? Are you, do you have access to a vehicle? Can you get around? What does your transportation needs look like? And then it kind of helps you think about the type of job you need to get to meet the needs of yourself and your family and your situation. And I think that type of intentionality also makes a lot of sense, just sort of thinking about what you need to meet your needs and to meet the needs of the people around you. And then I think also, related to the discussion about pay and your own value and your story about your daughter, I think it might have been also Fatuma, she's one of my commissioners and she's fantastic, so we're very lucky to work with her. But this sort of idea of mutual gain and mutual value for your employer and for you, you being so engaged in your own growth and development is gonna be good, not just for you, but for the company or the organization you work for, and should be a priority for both of you. So if it isn't, maybe that informs a decision about pivoting, right? And that's something to think about too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more information, the better. Anyone want to share? I know I love interaction, so anybody want to share kind of where they are in their career? Where are you looking to go next? I teach a lot of leadership classes, and I am so patient with my class. I just will wait and wait and wait till somebody, and then eventually no one can stand it any longer.
Can I make maybe a suggestion / ask folks? Maybe we could have people talk about it at tables or group up a little bit if you're sitting by yourself, and just sort of have that conversation. And then if people want to share out after talking to your neighbor.
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
Awesome.
Let's give you guys
Does that feel
5 minutes to
comfortable?
talk about it at your
Thank you.
tables. wrap up your conversation, and then we'll see if anybody wants to give any feedback from their table.
Okay. So, y'all, now that you've had a chance to talk to some of your neighbors and share some things and learn some things, are there things that have come out of your discussion that you'd like to share? It doesn't have to be personal. It could be kind of like themes from your table. Oh, we've got a taker.
Hi there. We had one that I think probably more people than we know can relate to. And it's something that we identified as the what ifs that we tend to get crippled by, and why we tend to stay more than the other two approaches more often than not. It's all the things that we think may happen and we project on that are potentially going to happen in the future that we need to plan for and secure, that is kind of holding us back.
That makes so much sense. And I mean, I think like when we think about something like security, like you know what your current situation is. The unknown can be a lot scarier. And if there's other people that you're supporting or who are depending on you, that can be very scary. And like uncertainty doesn't always feel good. So thank you for sharing.
I'll go here and then over here.
Okay.
So I think our table was the opposite, where we want our jobs to be stable and they're not. So, you know, if we're more like a healthcare table over here. So the landscape is insecure. We love what we do, and so we'd love to stay. Let us stay. That's what we
Oof.
Yeah, especially when you love what you're doing, right?
Well,
and you
and
just
you're
want
doing
st-
important
stability.
Yeah, and it's important.
Thank you. I had a lovely conversation with these two women at my table, and one of them maybe wants to get into professional development and training. And what we had talked about was the danger in building a job description which requires a certain level of education, you know, as opposed to saying level of education X preferred or commensurate experience, because it's a job seeker's market, you know, it's a job seeker's market. So why would you want to eliminate people who have a lot of experience but may not necessarily have, you know, the academic background? And I don't know if that's a gender sort of situation or not, but the job descriptions that we have where I work, which is Maine Savings Credit Union, always say, you know, we always put a level of education preferred and or X number of years experience, because I used to work in higher education and we would equate X number of years of experience with a certain level of academic standard.
That's really interesting. And is, you know, I actually don't know off the top of my head whether that's a gendered issue. I might look into that, because of right now, actually, we see a higher percentage of women going to college than men in sort of recent data. However, it is definitely an equity best practice to be sort of thinking about different kinds of experiences as qualifying you for certain jobs. And maybe this has been a topic at the conference, I'm not sure, but like sort of, I'm very interested in like competency-based hiring practices and things like that as a way to think about that and not rule people out if they might be great for a job. Absolutely.
Any other table that wants to? Oh,
We're having you running around. I'm just standing
know, I
here.
love
I'm
this.
like not helping, just hanging out up front. Oh,
So
and there was some. Okay, I saw you back in the back too. We'll come back there.
So I think this kind of goes like full circle between all of us. We ended up talking about how like we might actually be holding ourselves back from applying to better growth positions because of reasons that men probably don't. So like, I'm sorry, I forgot the way you worded it, but basically like applying like. No offense to any of the men in here, but like applying to a job that you don't necessarily qualify for because you're just confident about it. You're like, I'm just going to win it in the interview, where we will look at the whole list of requirements and like what they're looking for and be like, well, I don't fit like 3 of them, so I might not apply for that. And I mean, I've done that before too, where I've applied to completely, I filled all the list requirements and I still get denied. And it's like, so, you know, maybe men just don't care about that really. No offense. I don't mean it that way. But
I have a
full
friend
circle.
who says to me whenever I'm like dithering about something like that, she'll go, "A man would," which I don't know if that's my personal motto, but I do think it can be helpful to be reminded. And I will tell you personally, I mean, my job title in this role is executive director of the Maine Permanent Commission on the Status of Women, and that's like a very scary title to me, and I almost didn't apply for this job, and I only did it because a friend of mine was like, "You'd be great at that." So I think that's both of those things that I just said, I think point to the power of how we can help each other too by supporting each other and our mentees and our friends and our coworkers to like go for it if, you know, if it's something that they want.
Yeah, real life story. I had 2 people working for me. One was a man, one was a woman. They had exactly the same level of experience, exactly the same role in the organization. One said, I need to be promoted because I'm already doing the job and you need to promote me and give me more compensation. And the other person said, I looked at the job description for the next level and I haven't checked all the boxes yet, but when I do, I'll come and let you know so that then you can think about promoting me. Okay, so to your point, right, we have to ask ourselves, so I would encourage you to go back to what are you worth? Don't worry about checking all the boxes because most employers right now want people who are engaged, who can learn, who are wanting to help the organization meet its goals. And then they're thinking about, okay, do they check all the boxes? Right? They really want, because of this of the workforce needed in Maine right now, people are looking for those people that want to learn and grow, that have a growth mindset, and that's really, really important. And you said there was one other person back here?
Yes, there was someone back there. I'm gonna do it this time. I'm gonna be the runner. I gotta get my steps in.
It's interesting to hear the educational requirements for job descriptions. I'm currently pursuing my MPH, and we had someone else at the table who said that they recently hired some folks with MPHs, and they want to know what those folks expect to stay in that job. And I think it's an interesting idea about coming into this next phase of my career, earning a master's degree. Well, not really, I don't really know what to expect, and are there kind of outlined ideas. I currently work at the university. I'm getting my MPH, and I'm not doing something I'm super passionate about. So I'm wondering, and just given the field of public health at the moment, what's the future to come? There's a lot of uncertainty, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
I also have an MPH, and there's so many great competencies within that type of education, and first of all, that's great, and I think it's going to be awesome. It is also kind of a scary moment for that field, I think, and so figuring out how to navigate that is a challenge on the horizon. And also, we should talk after.
Really active. Anybody over here? Anybody want to share? Okay, awesome.
So I'm a new Mainer, came to Maine during the pandemic in 2021. I'm the Director of Employee Health for Maine Health. During the hiring process to get here, there was a couple offers on the table, you know, back and forth. And when I told my boss at my previous employer, like, hey, this is the opportunity I'm going for, I'm sorry, I'm going to be giving you a month notice. She waited 2 days to reach back out to me and say, we want to counter, we want to keep you. And what can I do to keep you? And I said, well, you could have offered me that while I was here. And so knowing your worth, like your daughter, I teach my kids this all the time. Like, they were just getting hired, and I'm going, no, but you have 6 years of military experience as a nuclear electrician. you shouldn't be getting the base entry level pay. You should be getting at least $22 an hour, not the $19 an hour that they're offering you. Yeah, but I need a job. That was their mindset. And I'm going, no, you need to get paid $22 an hour. Know your worth. Ask for it. And so he's making $22 an hour. But he would have never done that getting out of the military and knowing his worth. And so based on that education, just to share a little personal note, my husband was a high school dropout, got his GED, worked his way through the hotel line of Marriott International, was Marriott International Manager of the Year for 2013 and 2015. He's the only manager for Marriott International that ever did that in their career, beating out France and Russia. Opened for our current president, who was a speaker at one of those hotel conventions. He's currently disabled, and he's still getting recruited on a daily basis because they know his name and they know what his worth was in the hotel industry. So just know the education piece, the years of experience mean a lot when it comes down to paper and resume. In the master's in public health, great job. I just finished my master's in nursing administration, so I know it's hard.
Congratulations.
The degree does make a difference when it comes to healthcare. It does, to get to the C-suite roles.
Okay. Anything else? I think it's time to move on. This is great. Thank you so much for interacting, because it really helps, I think, everybody to gain insights from each other and to support each other, because we're all in this together. And so performance gets you in the room. High performers, we're going to get you in the room. Image and exposure gets you to the next level. Right? So based on a pie model, this is one methodology, is that performance is 10% of decision that gets you to the next level. We all like to think it's 100%. We perform, we keep our head down, we work really hard, we're going to get recognized, we're going to get to the next level. That may be true for some organizations. In other organizations, it can also be, what is your exposure? Who knows your worth? And so really starting to think about, what is your image and exposure? We're going to talk about that as you think about your career plan. If you don't have a career plan, a 1 to 3 year plan, I just encourage you to use this as your baseline and build it from there. And guess what? You can change your mind next week. No one's going to care about you changing your career plan. The most important thing is to actually start the process.
So as we're thinking about kind of like the networking portion of this conversation and how you can connect with people and grow your network, and also maybe support others who are in your kind of circle and who you know, I wanted to just touch briefly on kind of where we are now in terms of women in leadership, because that might be one avenue, is to try and connect with people who have a job you want and who might have common experiences with you, and reach out that way. So overall, Maine tends to rank pretty highly for like women in top executive roles. We don't actually have great data about sort of like women CEOs in Maine. I looked at New Hampshire did an analysis about their work, and I hate to just compare us to New Hampshire, but they, I think it was something like 26% or 23%. So, and I'm not saying that we're exactly the same, but it may be comparable. There was a U.S. News and World Report study that looked at women in top executive leadership roles, and Maine was in the top 10 with something like 32%. And then other markers of kind of gender balance in leadership that we tend to use are like what the legislature looks like. So in Maine, 42.5% of our legislators are women, which puts us in the top 10 of states, but it's still not at 50%. So I think there's certainly room for improvement on these, even though Maine is doing well when compared to other states. And maybe the people in this room will help us get even closer. I did a very small and interesting analysis of the boards of publicly held companies in Maine. We only have about 6 that are publicly traded. But there was a bill put into place a few years ago that became law a few years ago, asking the Secretary of State's office to do analysis on gender parity of those corporate boards, and setting out some requirements for like what it takes to meet gender parity. And for boards over 5 people, it's like it has to be roughly half. If it's 4 or fewer people, it's got to be at least 1. And of our like 6 corporations, 3 were in compliance with those requirements. Not a huge sample, so I don't know how much we can take away from that, but certainly there's some room for improvement in that space as well. And that may inform your networking and who you want to try and connect with strategically to get where you're going. And one of the things that I think about is, who do you want to talk to who has a job that you want? Like, what can you learn from them about how they got there, and what questions can you ask them?
Great piece of advice to start thinking about. And that's why we're talking about your network and your champions, because we really need to think about networking in a different way. Yes.
We do not have great data on that, and I think that is a flaw in a lot of the data sets that we have. It's actually something I think about a lot, and if you want to connect after, I would love to talk to you. Yeah, there's sometimes in Maine, really, in Maine data across the board, a lot of the big national data sets don't do a good job of capturing small population groups in Maine. We know that. It's true for some of our racial minorities, for new Mainers, for rural populations, for trans and non-binary folks. And so that is a flaw in sort of the data reporting that we've been putting out, and I think that's something we're looking at how to address, and would love to have conversations with any of you about that. And in terms of the numbers, it plays into that as well, because there's questions about how to address those gaps. Do we collect more data? Maybe, maybe not. Like, how does that look, and how do we sort of fill in the gaps in our knowledge, and then target our resources and work accordingly? So happy to connect after.
Yeah, great question. You know, as you think about networks, it's really about building relationships, because through relationships, opportunities can come your way that you never expected. And for some people, it's really easier to kind of shift your mindset to say, okay, networking, not really a big fan. But if you start talking about, can you build a relationship with someone? And when I talk about relationships, I'm talking about getting to know a person. So I had interesting conversations with someone the other day, and they were talking to me about a challenge they had talking to another executive. And I asked them this question: what do you know about them? And this person said, well, they used to work here, blah, blah, blah. You know, and then they came here this many months ago, and this is their history and their career. They, did this, and then they did this, and that's really what I know. And I said, okay, yeah, but I want to know, what do you know about the person, right? Are they a hockey fan? Are they a baseball fan? Do they have a family? Do they like to play golf? Do they, they like swimming? Do they hike? Just build a relationship is what networking is really all about. And it's just like little incremental steps over time, where you can build trust with somebody who's going to say like, hey, oh, you have a project you want, you need a person to help support. I know somebody that might be willing to do it. Or I know a resource we could tap into. And that's why networking is really, really important. Champions are the people who are going to put your name on the table when you're not in the room. This is when all the decision makers are in the room and they're talking about something strategic coming along, or some big opportunity that the company has now said they're going to implement. It could be one of the programs we heard about earlier today. Who can lead this program? The champion is the person who's going to stake their reputation on you. They're going to say, I know the person, and they're going to put your name on the table, and they're going to advocate that you get that opportunity. And so you have your network, and you have your champions. So right now, what we're going to do is give you time in your workbook to list out who do you need to add to your network and who are some champions that you can help further your relationship with, so it's more strategic and more thoughtful. Eleanor, and then you can share it at your table. So do this and then share with each other. What are your thoughts? As we, as you've given some really serious thought, which I'm so thankful for and grateful for that you're so engaged here. Does anybody have any, like any important things to share about your networking and your champions that you were able to discuss at your table?
One thing that came to mind is I think in addition to having communities and networks of strong women, it's nice to have men in your network because you can hear what they're asking for and you can hear what they're doing. And one example of this is I have a colleague who is a man in the same position as a woman, and he recently left our place of employment, and he told us that he had, oh, you all should apply for this other job as well, you're qualified for it. And then he said, and don't be discouraged by the pay range, because I told them what I was making now, and I asked for well over the pay range, and they gave it to me. And so the women and I were all talking about it, and we were like, what? You can do that? You can just like ask for more than the range that they're even giving you? And it was a moment where, then we all had our own conversations as women, but hearing that one anecdote from our male colleague that he shared with us like opened up a whole new world to like what's possible of what we could be asking for. So I thought that was something valuable to me. Like I don't have very many women in my network who no women in my network who had done that before that I know of. So I think having transparent male colleagues is useful to be able to learn from what they're doing as well.
One of the most important things is when you think about who your champions are, think about who are the decision makers. And, depending on your industry, the decision makers may be mostly men. Now, I come from an industry that is male dominated, and I'm not saying I have I've had great colleagues. I've had men champion me to get me into higher level executive roles. But you have to know who are the decision makers, whether it's a man or a woman or someone that's part of the BIPOC community. Who is it? Who's making the decisions? And making sure you're clear on that, and that as you think about champions, maybe you don't have a relationship with the decision maker, but maybe you have a relationship with someone who can influence the decision maker. So you have to be really thinking about, okay, who are my champions? Who can help put my name on the table to go after bigger opportunities? And they don't have to be bigger. That's probably a more impactful and purposeful opportunities for you. Right, that can be really, really important to think about.
I would also add that I sometimes think of, and this is maybe not totally in line with like the idea of sort of being really strategic in your networking, which I do think is important. But I also think about like peer networking, because like you never know like what your friends and the people who are in the roles around you are going to end up doing. And also sometimes it can be, there's so much power in collective knowledge and action, right? I mean, we know that from unions. We have lots of good examples of that. One of the sort of best things that came out of the virtual work environment during COVID at a former job of mine was all the junior staff could talk on Teams without attracting tons of attention by all going into a room together. And so we were able to we made a spreadsheet and compared our salaries to find out what was going on, which, you're allowed to do that in Maine and you should. I think that kind of thing it's not necessarily the kind of networking that we think of when we're trying to move to a higher role, but I think it can be extremely powerful, and it's a vote of confidence in the people around you that you trust them and see them as a really valuable part of your network too. Yeah. Oh, here, I'll come. Just it's kind of echoey in here.
I would kind of build on that a little bit, that I added kind of an additional column here. So champion opportunities of who can champion me, right? And network opportunities, where can I grow my network? But then also who can I champion? So building in that culture of, I don't want to have to convince somebody in leadership to champion me. I don't ever want somebody to have to convince me to champion them. And so if I can start integrating that into my practice. So I've got a couple people that I already do that for, and everyone in this room is in a leadership capacity in one way or another. And there's someone you can be championing in those rooms that you have a seat at the table.
I love that. Thank you for mentioning that. That's absolutely so true. To use our own influence to help lift other people up, to build them up, is amazing. So now, the last piece of this, right, is when you are going to go and you're going to have build more relationships. You're going to go out. You're going to talk to people. Could be your peers that eventually become your boss. I've had that happen, right? They become your boss. And we're going to talk about what is your brand? What do you stand for? Have you given any thought to your personal brand? Because it should communicate the unique you, the authentic you. And it's really important to think of how do you message your worth when you're meeting people? How do you start structuring your strengths? Talk about your purpose in life. How do you demonstrate to people that you have value? And understanding your brand is one way to really put those thoughts into a statement. And it's not that you have to go and actually say this statement, right? It's more you've thought through for yourself, what is my brand? And then how does that carry forth in the way you communicate with others? So in your workbook on page 4 and 5, you have an exercise to do. I'm a, and then you plug in role, whatever the role is, in this area, known for, maybe you're known for analytics, maybe you're known for healthcare, maybe you're known for education in the elementary schools, maybe you're known for multiple other things. And you draw on your strengths of maybe communication or personal interaction, or maybe your strength is data analytics, or I don't know, Eleanor, can you think of other strengths that I'm missing here that you could give good examples for?
Yeah, I mean, I think like strengths can include like flexibility and being a team player, public speaking. I mean, really anything. I think there's so much that we don't always think of as strengths that really are our strengths.
Yeah, and then what is the impact or result that your value to an organization brings? Do you help them implement new technologies? Do you help them expand their reach, providing healthcare in rural Maine? I mean, what is it that is your unique impact and result that you help an organization achieve? And so in your workbook, just take a moment. I think we gave you some examples, some go-bys, and write down your very first draft. And I'll have you know, I have rewritten my brand statement about 20 times myself, so this is not one and done. Take a moment, write your brand statement, and then share it at your table, and then we'll do a wrap-up. Eleanor, anything?
I just was also going to say, I thought of another strength, which I come from kind of a public health and sort of policy background, and I think another strength that is important to think about too is if you're serving a specific population, having shared lived experience with the population you're serving is a strength, and I'm just putting that out there as well.
So we'll give you 5 minutes, and then we're going to wrap this up with your action plan, because your workbook becomes your plan, and you're going to have great intentions, and we know you all do. We're all busy. You are all making a great impact in your communities, but we need to go to implementation and start practicing in order for us to create new habits. as it's wonderful to hear everyone talking. Does anybody have anything they want to share about this topic of your personal brand and any reflections on this particular exercise? Oh,
I'm stepping out of my comfort zone because I don't public speak. But we were just talking about this and how difficult it is for us to talk good about ourselves. How do we sell ourselves when we don't know, we're not comfortable? I just chatted with the ladies here, I just recently had a callback for a job that I had applied for, right? So nailed the first interview, nailed it, walked out feeling amazing, and then walked in for the second interview, and there was 8 men, 1 woman. It was the select board. It was for a municipality, and I caved. And I felt awful when I left, knowing that I was not going to get that job, which I was really disappointed about because I really wanted it, and I nailed the first interview, but it was intimidating. And I just my voice was shaking, and I could not sell myself.
You know what the most important thing is out of that experience is to focus on what did you learn, right? It's not about that you aren't qualified or you don't have the talent to do the job. Just self-reflection is, okay, what did I learn from that experience? And how can I help that to help me grow, to help me learn, to help me, really embrace the fact that, we all have things to learn. I'm still learning, people. I am still learning. I haven't nailed down leadership yet. So, just show some grace for yourself. You did the best you could at that moment, and then say, okay, is there anything valuable here for me to learn? And I'm so sorry that happened to you. It just wasn't meant today. Moving on. Yeah. Anyone else have any reflection? Okay, with that, whoop, right here.
In that moment, hi. So I've tried this before, and I've tried to negotiate salary, especially now that Maine made it a law that you can ask for your range. And I had a male CEO at the time who's no longer with the company, thankfully. I was just sharing this with Deb. And I was getting promoted at the time, and told me that if I wanted what I was asking for, then I needed to work harder and do better. And then the HR director told me I wasn't worth it, right to my face. So I won't let you stand out here and think that you're the only, so I put myself out there and got shut down. And it's, anyway, that's it. Pivot. I'm still trying.
But also I know we're running out of time, but this is what I want you to make sure you do, right, is take that breath and just recognize in those moments how you're feeling. Like, don't not deny it. You're feeling let down. You're feeling maybe like you're judging yourself a little bit. Recognize it and then say, okay, how can I turn this into a learning? Take that time to really say, okay, can I shift my mindset? This is like self-management, because your brain, right, is going to focus on the negative. It is. It's just the way our brains work. It's going to go right to the negative. And so the great thing about neuroscience is that they know that if you can focus on the positive, the learning, the sooner you're able to shift yourself out of that emotion to a new emotion. And we don't have time to get into all of that today because I could talk about that for 4 hours. And actually, I did a session on branding. It was 2 hours, and we're trying to do it in less than 10 minutes. So thank you all for sharing. And we're just going to end now on, your challenge and action plan. Starting today, who is one person you will intentionally establish a relationship with to expand your strategic network? Please get to action. Put it on your calendar. It doesn't even have to be a 4-hour meeting. All you need to do is get a hold of somebody, whether it's on a phone call, a Teams meeting, 10 minutes max. Hey, I just want to connect with you, get some thoughts. Many steps. What is the first situation or opportunity where you can apply your brand? Think about about that. Where is somewhere safe, even if you want to try it out somewhere safe and say, here's my worth, here's my brand, and give it a shot and practice it. Practice makes perfect, and there's reason. Again, we all have habits. Until you start practicing, that habit is not going to get any stronger. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And how will you hold yourself accountable to activating your plan? Right? So how are you going to make sure you do it? You know, like what little cheat trick in your mind are you going to use to say, like, I'm actually going to make this happen? And I'm going to make it happen this week, hopefully. Eleanor, anything else?
For that accountability piece, I have found that friends are also very helpful. I don't think so, except just to thank you all for doing this. I mean, I think it required some self-reflection and really like coming in and thinking about, I mean, being asked what you want is like a really big question. So thanks for engaging in that. And for letting me share some of my like emotional anxieties about this with you. I think it's easy to be the one holding the microphone and standing up here and like pretending that I know everything, and I certainly do not. I don't know if you feel like you do.
No.
So it's really nice to be able to kind of just have that conversation, and we had that here today, which I really appreciate.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be able to help facilitate this with Eleanor today. So thank you again, and you guys have a great afternoon.